Welcome to the channel, where global power shifts, behind-the-scenes diplomacy, and future-defining decisions come together, and today we are unpacking a stunning development that could reshape the entire Russia-Ukraine war and the security map of Europe. After years of bloodshed, sanctions, and stalled negotiations, Ukraine has reportedly stepped back from its NATO membership bid following high-level peace talks in Berlin, a move that has shocked allies, frustrated critics, and raised one massive question. Is this the beginning of the end of the war, or just another pause in a much longer conflict? By 2026, the Russia-Ukraine war has already rewritten modern warfare, exposed the limits of global alliances, and tested the resolve of Europe like never before. When the conflict first erupted, Ukraine's desire to join NATO became one of the central political flashpoints. For Kyiv, NATO membership represented long-term security, collective defense, and a clear alignment with the West. For Moscow, it was a red line, seen as an existential threat to Russian security and influence. For years, this single issue blocked almost every serious attempt at peace. The Berlin peace talks were different. Hosted quietly with German mediation and supported by several European powers, these talks were designed not as a grand televised summit, but as a pragmatic attempt to freeze the conflict and reduce further destruction. Unlike previous negotiations, these discussions focused less on symbolic victories and more on achievable compromises. Energy security, reconstruction funding, territorial control mechanisms, and long-term neutrality frameworks were all placed on the table. Ukraine's decision to drop its NATO bid did not come overnight, and it did not come easily. Years of war had exhausted the economy, strained the population, and reshaped political priorities inside the country. While public support for NATO had remained strong, there was also a growing realization that immediate membership was unlikely due to alliance constraints and ongoing conflict. In Berlin, Ukrainian negotiators reportedly framed the move not as surrender, but as a strategic pause, opening the door to alternative security guarantees without formal NATO accession. Under the Berlin framework, Ukraine would maintain a strong, modern military supported by Western training and technology, but without being formally tied to NATO's Article 5. Instead, a new multilateral security arrangement was discussed, involving key European states acting as guarantors. This model aimed to deter future aggression while addressing Russia's long-standing objections to NATO expansion. For Kyiv, it was about survival now, not promises later. Russia, on the other hand, presented the decision as a diplomatic victory. From Moscow's perspective, preventing NATO's eastward expansion had always been one of the core objectives of the war. Russian officials quickly highlighted Ukraine's shift as proof that military pressure combined with diplomacy could force strategic concessions. However, behind the scenes, Russia also faced its own pressures. Sanctions, military losses, and economic isolation had made a prolonged war increasingly costly. Germany's role in the talks was especially significant. By 2026, Berlin had transformed from a cautious mediator into a central diplomatic power in Europe. With energy systems restructured and defense spending increased, Germany had both the credibility and leverage to bring opposing sides to the table. The Berlin talks emphasized de-escalation, reconstruction, and European stability over ideological alignment, reflecting a broader shift in EU strategic thinking. Critics of Ukraine's decision argue that dropping the NATO bid risks undermining the sacrifices made since the war began. They fear it could embolden Russia or set a precedent that military force can block sovereign choices. Supporters counter that the move is tactical, not permanent, designed to stop the bleeding and secure Ukraine's future in a different way. They point out that NATO is never guaranteed and that alternative security models may offer faster, more realistic protection. From a military standpoint, the talks also addressed force positioning and ceasefire enforcement. Proposed measures included demilitarized buffer zones, international monitoring missions, and phased withdrawals tied to compliance benchmarks. While no final territorial settlement was immediately announced, the framework allowed for frozen lines combined with long-term negotiations, reducing the risk of sudden escalations. Economically, the Berlin discussions placed heavy emphasis on reconstruction. Ukraine's infrastructure, cities, and industrial base had suffered immense damage. In exchange for stepping back from NATO membership, Ukraine was offered expanded access to European markets, accelerated EU integration pathways, and a massive reconstruction package backed by European institutions and private investment. This economic dimension was critical in making the compromise politically viable inside Ukraine. The United States remained involved but noticeably less dominant than in earlier stages of the war. By 2026, Washington's focus had shifted toward broader global competition, encouraging European partners to take the lead in regional security solutions. While U.S. support for Ukraine remained strong, there was also a recognition that a negotiated settlement, even an imperfect one, was preferable to endless escalation. Public reaction inside Ukraine was mixed but complex. War fatigue had set in, yet national identity and sovereignty remained deeply important. Ukrainian leadership framed the decision as a temporary diplomatic maneuver, not a rejection of Western values. They emphasized that Ukraine's democratic path, military strength, and European future were non-negotiable, even if NATO membership was postponed. For Europe, the implications are enormous. A Ukraine outside NATO but firmly tied to Europe represents a new kind of buffer state, one that challenges traditional alliance structures. If successful, this model could influence how future conflicts are managed on the continent. If it fails, it could expose dangerous gaps in collective security. Russia-Ukraine relations remain fragile. Trust is minimal, and any agreement will require constant verification and international involvement. Still, the Berlin talks marked one of the most serious diplomatic efforts since the war began. The decision to drop the NATO bid removed a major obstacle, creating space for dialogue that had previously been impossible. As 2026 unfolds, the world is watching closely. Will this shift lead to a lasting ceasefire, gradual normalization, and rebuilding, or will it simply reset the conflict under new terms? History shows that peace processes are rarely linear, and setbacks are common.